We just set up a podcast studio in like 30 seconds. I feel like we just need a plant or something to make this cozy. But let's just pretend it's you and me, Arnab. Well, first of all, welcome to the Product Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's so exciting to be here. Look at this full house. Yeah.
Pretty impressive to be right after lunch with a packed house of 1,500 product leaders here. And I think part of the reason is that Asana is a very loved product in a very not loved category, I would say, right? So tell me more about where do you think that love and connection come from?
Well, I mean, Asana's been around for a long time. It's a product that's been available for about 17 plus years. And the founders had this overarching mission and vision of eliminating the work about work and doing so in a way where the end user experience for the people interacting with the product is truly delightful. Things like performance, speed of updates, ease of use, easy to get started. And that design ethos has carried forward to this day. And so it's been phenomenal to see. Like, I've only been at Asana for about 7 months. And it's been phenomenal to be at a company where the product has so many end users, the project managers, people in IT and operations, people in marketing operations who use it on a day-to-day basis, and that's how their life runs. So like those businesses, those critical workflows run on Asana, and that performance, that speed, the delightful experience keeps people coming back.
So as a fun fact, I actually used Asana for the first time back in 2010.
Wow.
the co-founder is one of the Facebook co-founders, right?
That's right, yeah.
And it was just like the beta product. And obviously it's incredible to see you're even a public company now.
Correct.
And you joined as CPO less than a year ago?
Yeah, I joined in September of last year.
So I think we need to address the elephant in the room. For people who work in SaaS, they're like, oh my God, there's apocalypse, right? So what is happening from your perspective? I see like Asana, even though it's a great product, is 50% down year to date.
Yep. So I think the investor sentiment in the entire SaaS market is just fully risk off. And that makes sense because if you're an investor and that's what you do as a living, you're seeing all of the innovation that's happening with the foundational models and the amount of productivity you can get out of Claude Code or Cowork or Codex. And you have to be judicious about how you invest money. So that's like one reality, and it's a risk-off reality from an investor perspective. But then if you take a look at actual business performance of SaaS products, we were talking in the green room about companies like Figma, about companies like Atlassian, about companies like Datadog. These are products that deliver real value, that ensure 99.99% uptime reliability, that ensure enterprise-grade governance, security, and trust. They've been having phenomenal quarters to date. So the actual end user utilization of these products hasn't tapered off in that dramatic way that investors have been thinking about, because there's legitimate value that they're bringing to real world business workflows. And then the third thing I would say, so the one is the risk-off sentiment, the second thing is actual real world value. And if you take a look at the real business performance of these companies, that they're doing fine. The third is, if you think a bit about what is the structure of AI winners versus losers, today, all the investors are focused on is the AI infrastructure layer, because they're kind of guaranteed some amount of returns if you invest in picks and shovels. But then if you look at what value can be provided on top of those picks and shovels, the value and the job to be done hasn't dramatically changed. The human beings and businesses, brick and mortar businesses, online businesses, they still have the same business workflows. So the question is, how fast can companies evolve to take advantage of the AI tailwinds to deliver better, more meaningful experiences to customers? And I think that is the challenge for companies like us, like Asana, going forward.
Totally. I think part of the narrative for the market to not be always bullish is the fact that, okay, there's a bunch of LLMs and they're promising that they can, in some cases, replace the functionality. So curious to know your perspective on where your moat is now as you also start integrating with some of those LLMs.
Totally. So, I spoke at the Code with Claude event in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, and Anthropic themselves had a detailed guide for what they want app builders and developers to focus on versus what those developers should not focus on. And their guidance was anything that brings the unique business context of the job to be done that you're focused on, like Asana's focused on ensuring that human beings and AI agents can work harmoniously together to supercharge business critical workflows across marketing, IT, and operations. So anything that brings that enterprise context, that enterprise brain to the front door of the AI agent and does it in a way where authentication, authorization, trust, uptime reliability, the end user human interaction experience is figured out, they themselves are saying that that is a compounding benefit. Like that is an investment that will ensure that your app constantly gets better over time. Things that are more focused on the inner workings of the model itself, like routing rules or fine tuning or other ways in which you could sort of make the AI tooling itself work better. Those are the things that are compensating for gaps in the current model. So that is their messaging already to the industry, and I actually agree with it, because the interesting thing that got me into Asana in the first place was even in September of last year, like working in the technology industry, working at Okta previously, where I was seeing a phenomenal uptake of non-human identities in the enterprise. It was clear to me that LLMs and AI products would upend the system. The interesting thing about Asana, and you've seen this yourself, having been a user starting from 2010, is it's designed to be this enterprise context graph where you can go from a mission or goal to a portfolio to projects to many tasks. And filling out that context graph helps you define any sort of end-to-end business process. And that, to me, is an amazing way in which you could bring the right data of who does what by when and how to the front door of agents. So when you bring that agent into the system, you're going to supercharge that entire compounding process of moving things faster, learning things faster, completing things faster.
So I hear you talk about enterprise, and super interesting, because when I first used your product, I wasn't an enterprise company, and I can imagine that you still segment your product across different types of businesses. So as a product leader, then how do you go about actually building in ways that a large enterprise feels like you are catering to them, while maybe as an SMB still feels the value?
Excellent question about how to separate out investments for larger enterprises versus SMBs. Honestly, when you think about the kind of work that we do, which is ensuring teams can be highly productive, a team within a marketing organization in an SMB is working in roughly the same way as an enterprise, except the differences are probably around integrations into third-party sources, like where does your data live could be different. It could be more SharePoint or Office 365 oriented in the enterprise versus Notion or Google Drive oriented in SMBs, compliance certifications, things like that. And so what we are trying to do is we are trying to ensure that the end user experience is as delightful as possible, and sort of takes that ethos of what it would mean to take an SMB and make them successful. And then as we explore upmarket opportunities, consciously choosing what is the right ROI for investing in those incremental integrations or certifications to unlock serviceable market.
Let's talk about that, because I guess in an SME situation, PLG is still king, right? People get to value relatively fast, and then from there, they don't need that much interaction with the sales team. But if you go enterprise, at some point, you also have to somehow do some sort of custom integration. And forward deployed engineer, hot term, still kind of unclear what that really means, right? So I'm curious to know, what is that? How do you apply that type of go-to-market motion for an enterprise so you can help them get to value faster?
Great question. So I'll actually answer this in two different ways. One is within the product organization at Asana, we've adopted a slightly different organizational structure and areas of responsibility than historically. One is the entire PLG team has moved into product, including pricing and packaging, the engineering work required to go do the experimentation, the product management resources, and we've empowered them with AI-first tools to be able to glean insights and analytics and run experiments faster. So one is we brought PLG into product and made it a core job to be done with the general manager holding a revenue number inside product reporting to me. So we intentionally made that choice because for us, PLG is an acquisition funnel where even if you are a Fortune 500 company, a lot of our Fortune 500 companies started off being a 5 or 10 person team just signing up to get their work done, and that helped us expand later. The second thing is for PLG, we also made an intentional choice, which is in this day and age where you can get so much done with Cowork and Codex, as a operational workflow company, it is difficult for us to provide value to extremely small businesses. Like if your business is like 10% or smaller, then you would probably be able to go ahead and hack around the limitations of spreadsheets and email and Slack with these agentic tools. But when it becomes slightly larger than that, like if you're truly an SMB in the sense of a 50 or 100% company, then it's a sweet spot for us going above that funnel. So we've intentionally focused the PLG business in that area where we're looking at 50 plus, all the way to Fortune 500 companies, because that's an acquisition funnel for us.
So is that a separate business unit for you?
Yeah, so that PLG GM is a separate business unit reporting into the CPO. The second thing is for our newer products, and if you're here physically with us today, you can go check out the Asana demo booth outside. You'll notice we've got like newer products, which is all about AI agents and human beings collaborating with each other. So that in an enterprise requires a forward deployed engineer to figure out what are the right integrations for that AI agent, what should the intake for that be, because that agent can get trained with behavior, with external data, things like that. And so we have an incubation team of AI specialists who are like forward deployed engineers who are reporting up to the general manager for Asana AI, who reports up to me. So we've brought that FDE talent into the product org as well, because not only do they help us deploy our first sets of customers, all the learnings get fed directly back into engineering, and they are way faster at like helping us achieve product market fit than if it was a separate team in the revenue organization who talk to us like once a month. Like they're like literally sitting with our PMs side by side, helping us sell, close, and the first few deals and helping those customers adopt.
That's a pretty unique org design from what I've seen, right? You are a CPO, have multiple GMs owning P&L and reporting into you.
That's right.
How many GMs do you have?
So we have a GM for Asana AI, we have a GM for our PLG product, and we have a GM for another product that hasn't yet been announced as yet and is secret. So I can't tell you what it is, but it'll be announced shortly. Yeah.
So as we go layers down, we were talking this morning about the intentions to collapse managerial roles, to empower even managers to build. Like, how are you thinking about structuring your own pods and empowering basically non-engineers to ship?
So the way in which we're doing this is I'm encouraging our product team as well as the FDEs in like two slightly different ways. One is for the product team, I want them to go fast, like product being PMs and designers. They're going faster at two areas. One is going from ideas to prototypes, and then suggestions for the engineers to like review and ship. And the second is addressing voice of the customer issues. You know, one of the things that I'll zoom out a little bit. Like the thesis we have at Asana is we want to use this data structure we have, which is the work graph, mission, goals, portfolios, projects, to build a self-learning brain for the enterprise, where as you contribute ideas, decisions, approvals back into it, AI can operate faster on that and help you make decisions and get to outcome faster. That's the macro goal. And so one of the ways in which you can manifest that for voice of the customer is when we get voice of the customer feedback requests from the field in Slack, or it comes directly to us as an Asana task, we can pick that up, put it into a queue for one of our AI agents to review based on all of the other pieces of feedback we've been collecting, prioritize it, assign that to a PM for any of their taste making. If the PM says, yeah, this is my final sort of proposal for it, let's see if we can fix this issue, we have an agentic AI coder that is connected via MCP to that task inside Asana that can then go build out the PR, and then it gets routed to the engineer for review going forward. So like these kinds of flows are possible because there's a ton of data in that context graph about historical decisions, things that are in the product backlog, and that context graph is constantly being kept up to date. The who does what by when and how is being constantly kept up to date. And one more step beyond this is like, yes, we are doing this right now to improve product building and eliminate some of the tax that engineers were paying in the past, where they were personally having to make decisions and pick up those tickets, to like they're just getting PRs to review that's approved by the PM from a strategy perspective. You could apply that same process to like a number of things. Like if you're thinking about marketing operations and campaign launches, having a context graph that's up to date, plugging an AI agent into that means that you can go from an intake form to a campaign brief, to a preview of your like website, to finalized copy that your CMO loves way faster. And that keeps compounding because you can take those decisions and feed them back into the compound graph.
To me, that is the promised land for non-engineering teams, because we've seen engineering teams using shared code bases and kind of collaborate across technical tools to ship code. But as we think about the rest of the world, like the 99% of people who don't code, it's still, the work has still been very fragmented, right? Like you have your to-do list, you have your document, but there is not like a shared place where you can actually build stuff. I mean, it's a shared place where you can communicate. There is a shared place where you can keep track, but like ultimately being able to orchestrate across different tools, I think that would be a huge unlock. Then the next question there is, then, and especially a company that is measuring productivity gains, like how do you actually prove that all of this orchestration, all of these new ways of working drive value for the business?
Again, great question, because if you take a look at all of the research that came out last year from Goldman Sachs and McKinsey about real productivity gains in the enterprise, after AI spend had gone up, all those results came back at 0%. And the reason why this is happening is because, like, okay, what people are getting access to is they're getting access to this like super genius genie in Claude or ChatGPT, but they're chatting with it. Each individual is like copy pasting data in and out, but then all of the rest of your processes are still gummed up, and none of those decisions are making it back into a context graph that will create that compounding benefit. So again, like within Asana, obviously, like we are all bought in on the Asana Kool-Aid. We run all of our processes in Asana, whether it's like customer success or escalations, executive briefings, or product launch. And then with the product launch stuff, what we've been able to do is, we can take our Chorus or Granola meeting recordings, pump in the transcripts into Asana. So that gives us more real-time data. So let's say you're doing a stand-up about a PRD review. There's a PRD that's linked in Asana. There's the call notes that's linked in Asana. You can go back to the spec writer agent, and you can see a demo of it outside, and you can ask it to like revise the PRD based on it. Then you can go and ask the agent that is doing your launch planning to break up that PRD into tasks that the coding agent can pick up. And all of these things, again, as you're evaluating them, like human beings are becoming like evals, right? Like we are like evaluating the quality of the output. As you say yes, no, approve, change, that's feeding back into the shared memory for the agent that gets written back into the context graph.
Automatically.
Yes, because it's writing it back into Asana, right? Like it's writing it back into that graph database. And so the next time you run it, it's already got all of that latest decisions inside. And I would say that, if you were using these tools, whatever you were using in 2016, like Jira, Asana, Trello, Salesforce, even for like CRM, the big challenge at that point was getting human beings to record all of these activities inside the system was insane. No one wanted to do it. And then even if it was recorded, a human being's ability to go and read all that data, grok it fast enough, and come up with the next best action is limited just by time and how much context we can hold. Whereas AI agents don't have that problem. In fact, they love this. Even if you start out with a shallow graph, if you can create this loop where it's proposing ideas or proposing specs or proposing PRs that are terrible, but as a human being, you're giving it feedback and you're correcting it, and that correction is getting automatically recorded, you will get way faster, every week, every month, every year.
I think you bring an interesting point. I mean, Salesforce recently made this announcement that they are going headless.
Yeah.
Right? They are exposing their data through MCPs, well-structured API, CLI, and kind of allowing other interfaces to harness that data. How are you thinking about that for your own product?
Yeah, so again, like we have thought about two different modalities of work. One is we want to express the Asana work graph in as rich a way as possible via MCP and MCP UI into all of the apps. So, we have an Asana app for Claude, we have an Asana app for ChatGPT, Google built one for Gemini, And I think that is amazing for individual productivity, and we want to meet people where they're at. Because again, I want to drop the tax of collecting the information and putting it back into Asana. What I mean by that is, like, today, if you have Claude hooked up to Asana, Gmail, and other apps, you can say, like, hey, what are the top things I should focus on today? And, oh, okay, like, looks like, based on my email inbox, I don't have these things tracked in the right project. You can just talk to Claude, and it will update the project data for you. So I'm fully sold on that particular flow. The other flow that's very interesting is what happens for multiplayer use. And what we mean by that is, how do you ensure that all that knowledge and memory is not stuck in your Claude instance, but can actually operate inside the graph itself and work across multiple human beings? So we have made AI agents that are powered by the latest frontier models, and over time you'll be able to like bring your own agent inside of that, where they operate as individual actors within the system. They're not Carlos's agent or Arnab's agent. They're a teammate. And you can think about like what is the role-based access control, or what projects or portfolios that teammates should be assigned to. And when they're there, they watch it like a person on your team. And they can react to a question from you, they can react to a question from me, they can react to a status update, they can automatically and proactively take action. So those are the two different modalities of work. One is how do you get data in and out of the context graph as fast and as efficiently as possible. Headless is good for that, MCP is good for that. The second is how do you exploit the context graph for multiplayer, near real-time collaborative work between humans and agents, and that's when you work inside Asana.
Arnab, thank you for your time and giving us a sneak peek into life after the SaaS apocalypse.
Yeah, of course.
Give it up
Happy
for
to be
Arnab.
here. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah.